Alright, algebra, this is going to be a quick video over absolute inequalities. We're not going to spend much time on this, but I at least want to go over something. Alright, here's absolute value x. What absolute value means is how far a number is away from 0. So basically, whatever that number is, it's itself, but a positive version. So in other words, if we plug in -2, absolute value of -2, that's going to be 2. Absolute value of 2 is 2. Nothing really changes there, it's just how far it is away from 0. So it's like the positive version. So if we have like absolute value of x is less than 2, what that's telling me is that x, when I take the absolute value, has to be less than 2. So if I plug in a 1, the absolute value of 1 is 1, and that is less than 2. So like absolute value of 1 equals 1, which is less than 2. Now if I plug in a -1, that equals 1, which is also less than 2. If I plug in a 0, that is 0, and it's less than 2. Now if I plug in a -2, that equals 2, which is not less than 2. So kind of can see what it's supposed to be doing here. Let me show you on a number line what it looks like. Here's 0, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, -1, -2, -3. So I'm going to circle 2. And this has to be less than 2. So all the numbers less than 2 go this way. And the only problem is it's got to stop at -2. Because when I plug in a -2 for the absolute value, it ends up being equaling 2, which is not less than 2. But like -1.99, the absolute value of that equals 1.99, and that is less than 2. So you see how it goes all the way up to that circle and doesn't go past it. And that's how you graph the absolute value. So let's do another one. Here we have the absolute value of x plus 5 is greater than 3. So I'm going to go ahead and solve it like normal, subtract 5 from both sides, and I get absolute value of x is greater than -2. That means when I draw my number line, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I circle -2. And when x is greater than -2, that means I go to the right. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second. So I'm going to the right. Now, if I plug in x like a 2, the absolute value of 2 is greater than -2. Guess what? That works out. So I'm going to fill it in. Let's try 3. Is 3 greater than -2? Yeah. So on this one, it ends up being everything to the right. So always check your answers. Like if I put 5 is greater than -2, we work out. Now some of y'all might be confused by that, but you shouldn't be, because look, right here. What did I say about absolute value? Whatever number you put into the absolute value, you always get a what back? A positive back. So all positives are bigger than -2. So of course it's going to include everything this way that's bigger than -2. You see that? Alright, let's keep going. What about when we have like an x plus 1 is less than 3? We know that the absolute value has to be less than 3. So if we drew a number line just for this, it would look like this. 0, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Circle the 3. And for x to be less than 3, it shades this way. I'm going to stop right here. Because if I plug in a -3, let's say this whole thing equaled -3, then the absolute value of -3 is 3, and that is not less than 3. So I have to stop right here. So far, this is what I've got filled in. Now, this is how I solve what x is. What this graph is telling me is that x plus 1 is less than 3, and x plus 1 is greater than -3. So to solve for x, I have to solve each one of these. So x plus 1 is less than 3. Draw my line, subtract 1 from both sides, and I get x is less than 2. That's one of my answers. Now I'm going to do the other one. X plus 1 is greater than -3. Subtract 1 from both sides, and I get x is greater than -4. That's my other answer. Now we're done. I got both these answers. And you would graph those two answers. Let's do another one. Here we have 2 times the absolute value of x plus 4 is less than 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is make this an easier problem. Sorry. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve this. I did that so it would make it a little bit easier so we didn't have any fractions. The first thing I really wanted to get rid of is this 2 right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Because that will cancel out, and I'll have absolute value of x plus 4 is less than 2. Now what this is telling me is that x plus 4 has to be less than 2. So that means that x plus 4 is less than 2, and that x plus 4 has to be greater than -2. So now let's solve it. Subtract 4 from both sides. On both the equations, and I get x is less than -2. Over here I get x is greater than -6. And that's my answer. I'm done. All I have to do now is graph it. Come in tomorrow and we'll practice this. That's the end, folks.